Well, good afternoon. It has been a couple of days since I've posted anything, been dealing with some of the aftermath and the progress of Hurricane Ian as it hit Florida. Even though I now personally reside in the state of Ohio, I lived in Florida for 9 years. I manage a radio station which is still in Florida and is still off the air because FPL has not yet restored power to our transmitter site. But that's another whole issue. But for those of you that are missing my radio show on Local 840 WPGS, I promise you, just as soon as we get, first of all, power to the site, and our engineers are trying to get out there. A lot of where it is, it's kind of in an out of the way place, as most radio transmitters are, and so there's some debris in the road, and there is some flooding in that area. We haven't even been able to get in there and ascertain if the tower site itself might also have been flooded, and if that's the case, it's going to be a prolonged time because new computer equipment, etc. So we appreciate your well wishes. Keep us in your thoughts and prayers, please, and we'll get back on the radio just as quickly as we can. But I did want to offer a few little, shall we say, insights into Hurricane Ian and, of course, the liberal propaganda and spin. Now, everybody's been talking about how Don Lemon tried so hard on CNN to get any weather expert on there that he could to blame Hurricane Ian on red states and Republicans rejecting climate science. He wanted to make this about the political agenda of, if we just had more green energy, if we had just gotten rid of the flatulating cows and the gas-guzzling fossil vehicles and acknowledged that there really is climate change, we wouldn't have had a hurricane this devastating. And basically, the scientific world, the meteorologist world told him, no, that's not how it works, Don. And he literally did a major faceplant on CNN. And why they haven't just outright fired him? Well, I know why. Because he is a member of a protected class. No. Not just because he's a person of color. He's a person of color who also happens to be a member of the LGBTQ community. Therefore, he is in the protected class. He can't possibly be fired. Otherwise, you're going to get all of the spin that this was done because of his skin color. This was done because of his sexual orientation. Wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that he is a complete incompetent dolt, a reject who couldn't make it in acting, so he got a gig on CNN where all he has to do is put on a good-looking suit, look good, smile right, and read a teleprompter, and once in a while, he gets to inject his own personality, which is absolutely cringe. Just ask the guy at the bar when Don stuck his hand down his own pants, touched his own junk, and then stuck the fingers in the face of the bar patron who dared to say something to Don that he didn't like. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we not allowed to talk about sexual harassment when it involves people of the protected class? So you've got the libloons out there trying to blame Hurricane Ian on, climate change. I can tell you this. Living in a state where we have a senator who claims he's running for the people, Tim Ryan. Makes me wonder if his real name is Ryan Berg. He wants to follow California's lead. He thinks Ohio ought to declare the sale and purchase of gasoline vehicles after 2035 illegal. Well, first of all, you do know that Ohio is one of the largest petroleum producing states in the U.S. We put out more fossil fuel than Texas. That's truth. Good luck with that, Mr. Ryan. By the way, good luck getting reelected. And for those of you who watch me from Ohio, J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance. There, I said it. Now, I've happened to watch lots and lots of utility trucks heading down I-75, heading down I-95, these fossil fuel driven utility trucks heading for Florida. There to help with Power restoration. It's a good thing those utility trucks run on fossil fuel. You know, there's absolutely nobody in the state of Florida right now, and I've literally, over the past 48 to 72 hours, have talked with dozens and dozens of friends, work associates, relatives who live in the Sunshine State. Nobody there right now is saying, hey, I really wish I had an electric car. First of all, you'd have no way to recharge it. See, what they're trying to do right now is just get the electric turned back on. Can you imagine as the electrical grid began to power back up and everybody immediately, because they have an electric vehicle, immediately is plugging it in because I gotta get my car charged. I gotta get somewhere. It would literally just blow the grid again. And there would have to be all these instructions, and
If your last name starts with A and B, you can recharge today. If your last name starts with C through F, you can recharge tomorrow.
I mean, there'll be all of this just nonsense. We are not ready. We do not have the infrastructure, and the lithium battery technology does not yet exist to make the reality and the practicality of everybody driving electric vehicles. It is still, I'm sorry, science fiction. I'm not anti-electric cars. I think eventually we're probably going to get there. But let it be done the old-fashioned way. A market-driven economy. Let there be a demand for it. Naturally, don't create it by making gasoline cars illegal. Make the electric cars practical. Make them affordable. And make sure there's enough infrastructure in place that getting them recharged and being able to take off on a family vacation doesn't mean you've got to plan an extra 3 or 4 hours of travel time because of your downtime having to recharge. I have one of the elders in my church owns a Tesla. It's a cool car. I've ridden in it. I mean, it really is a sweet ride. He was telling recently he just took a ride in the Ford F-150 electric version, what's called the Lightning. And I said, I'm sure it's a beautiful truck. And I'm sure just driving down the road in it is an awesome experience. I said, I also know from things that I have read that as soon as that truck has any kind of payload in the back or is pulling anything, even like a small Coleman camper or a little trailer with a riding lawnmower on the back, you can literally watch the full power charge literally go like that in a matter of miles. You know, on a full charge, why, you can go 300 miles in the electric Ford truck. With any kind of payload or hauling something, you can go about 45 miles. So the practicality isn't there. But yet we're going to get hit with ad nauseum now this idea that Hurricane Ian, and of course, Ron DeSantis, evil red governor. How dare he send migrants to Martha's Vineyard? In actuality, if I were on Team DeSantis and I was one of his advisors, I would be saying, man, you need to get right out there and be proactive and say, you know what? The wisdom and the foresight of Ron DeSantis, he got 50 migrants out of harm's way. He sent them to safe Martha's Vineyard, and then they were placed in internment camps. So you know the spin that's coming, but I've decided I want to take the Rhino Republican approach on this. I really do. You know how Rhino Republicans are. They start out sounding like real Republicans. They start out sounding like conservatives. Then they get elected, and then you find out that they were really nothing more than Democrats dressed in Republican drag. But they start out, they were, very much aligned with conservatives on things like faith and family values. Then over time, it begins to erode. First, back in the 90s, they were all on board with we need a constitutional amendment that says marriage is between a man and a woman. Then, of course, under Barack Obama, the Supreme Court decides that, same-sex unions can be called marriages. And everybody on the left celebrated, and the conservatives were quiet. We didn't like it. We were quiet. the rhinos began to finally say, you know what, we need to embrace it. We need to, because that's how rhinos are. They start out saying they're on the right side of an issue, and then of course they always adapt and mold. So rhinos, they get upset that the liberals seem to be at the forefront of all the cool stuff, and Republicans are always fighting against it, and then eventually we come around to it lately. And now I think the rhinos really want to lead on this hurricane naming. It has been the long-standing practice that every other hurricane has a male name, and then the next hurricane has a female name, and they go back and forth. Hurricane Rhonda, Hurricane Earl, Hurricane Frida, Hurricane Hector, and it just kind of goes back and forth. Now, I'm not sure, because again, this is one of those things I personally don't care about. I'm not sure what the whole history involved with that was. Were all hurricanes named after men, and some feminists thought, that's not right, that's discrimination? Or were all hurricanes named after females, and the feminists stepped in and said, why is this thing of natural death and destruction being named after a woman? Why isn't this named after a man? When I first went on the air in Florida, the station owner did a Saturday morning 5-hour show. And I had only lived in Florida, it was less than a year. I'd only been on that station a few months, and we were getting ready for the first hurricane I was going to experience. But the hurricane had a male name, so he kept referring to it as a hurricane. I have decided that the rhino position, if they really want to be cutting edge and they want to be out at the forefront and they want to lead in an area of complete social injustice, hurricanes being named after men and women and swapping every other one, how do you know what the gender is of that hurricane? I think rhinos, and I'm pretty sure the libs will join them on this, I think rhinos should come out and be for non-binary hurricane names. Seriously. Name every hurricane either Pat or Chris. Is Pat a guy? Is Pat a woman? Is Chris a guy? Is Chris a woman? We don't know. It's an innocuous term. I think it's absolutely reprehensible and sexist and discriminatory to name a hurricane either after a guy or a female. That hurricane hasn't had an opportunity to tell us what it is. It's right now, it's like listening to Stacey Abrams in Georgia, who is literally getting her arse handed to her in her attempt to be elected as governor. And now she's trying to gin up the women's vote. She's being discriminated against, not just because she's a person of color, but because she's a woman. Yet, Stacey Abrams absolutely refuses to answer the fundamental question, what's a woman? Well, only a woman can answer that. Okay, you're a woman. Well, I know what makes me a woman, but I don't know what makes her a woman or them a woman. Well, how can you gin up that you want the women to be incensed that you're being discriminated against, but you can't even articulate what a woman is? See, this is the level of delusion and insanity that we're dealing with right now. I mean, seriously, this is the delusion of insanity that we're dealing with right now. If you're confused about gender, let me invite you to take a visit to the old family farm. Try milking a bull and see what happens to you physically. And you will walk away, you will be carried away on a stretcher, but one thing will be resolved in your mind completely. There is a biological, physical difference between a male and a female, period. And men having operations to look like a female and are then being embraced as female, where you're asking us all to participate in group delusion. And then we are even watching on Facebook, and I did a full video commentary about this probably a year ago, about the changing, evolving family and the couple that he has become she, she has become he, and the she that's now a he gave birth to a baby, and the used to be a he is now the mommy. And there was a scene where he was trying to breastfeed because he had been given special injections to be able to produce milk. I'm sorry, that's not milk, that's man sweat. And as far as I'm concerned, that is absolute child endangerment. It is abuse, and it is certainly wickedly perverse. But this is what we are being told now is normal. And in places like Canada, you can't criticize this, or you will go to jail. Now, it's happening here. It's starting out as, quote, Facebook jail and, being penalized by big tech on social media platforms that you can't talk this way. Just like now, the purge of the Ray Epps videos on YouTube have begun. Isn't that interesting? Ray Epps is even being defended now by a Democratic senator who is saying, leave that guy alone. He didn't do anything. Really? He's all over on video saying, go into the Capitol, go in. We see him whispering to a young man who then leads the first breach of the Capitol security, but he didn't do anything. Well, I'm sorry, then the dude in the Viking helmet who stood at Nancy Botox Pelosi's desk and banged the gavel, what did he really do? The whole lie going on there. There was an attempt to overthrow the government. There was no attempt to overthrow the government. And now they're fact-checking any videos that talk about that it is false information to insinuate that the FBI might have been in charge. It stirred this up, really? Because even the New York Times was talking about it. But that's another topic for another day. Back to the hurricane. Our thoughts and prayers obviously go out to the people of Florida and the aftermath and what they're having to deal with. And I mean this sincerely. I lived in Florida myself for 8 years. I lived through 4 hurricanes, a half a dozen tropical storms. I understand what they're dealing with. And you have to understand, if you've never been through it, it's not just it's scary and traumatic, but when it's finally over, in the area I lived, I am told, looks like this today. The skies are blue. It's absolutely beautiful and picturesque, which was always typical a couple of days after the hurricane. Just that absolute picture-perfect weather, the stuff that invites the tourists to come on down and play. The problem is there's no power. And when you're working to clean up your yard, repair your house, try to put your life back to normal, and you can't go to the store and buy anything because they're closed. You can't get gas for your vehicles because there's no electricity to run the gas pumps. When you're having to do all of this work and the temperatures have returned back to season normal and it's hot and it's humid, and when you go in the house it's dark and it's sticky because there's no air conditioning, it really just triggers the stress levels like you can't believe. So please keep the people in Florida in prayer. And, Godspeed to these linemen and all they are doing to restore power. You talk about a group of people who don't get enough appreciation and recognition. Why don't they get their own special day? We give an entire month to a group of people based on who they sleep with. Every time I go on Facebook, there's kind of a joke running around. Can we just end the National Insert Name Day? We had National Daughter Day, National Sons Day. I guess yesterday was National Coffee Day. I missed it. And every day there's a national something or other. Can the guys that literally put themselves in harm's way during dangerous times, not just first responders and EMTs, but how about the guys that literally, in the aftermath of hurricanes and lightning and horrific conditions, are dealing with thousands of volts of electricity so that you and I can enjoy our creature comforts? I think those guys need a big thumbs up, a huge thank you. Thank you so very, very much. God's blessing on the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, and we will be back on the air just as soon as FPL restores power.